Welcome to lesson 8 of our Primavera P6 training. So once again, my name is Obalim and I still remain your anchor person. So in this particular lesson, we're going to be learning primarily about how to create and assign resources, and then also talk about roles, because we may not be able to talk about resources without first of all discussing the roles, and then also talk about expenses. Now, all of these things would also help us to inadvertently be able to come up with the cost estimate. So in essence, after assigning the resources, the roles, as well as the expenses, this will give us the budgeted total cost. The budgeted total cost of our project, which is part of what we're going to be doing in this particular lesson. So in essence, my goal in this lesson is to help you understand how to create roles, how to create and assign resources, and then also expense part of your Primavera P6. And then of course we shall also be taking a look at how all of this rolls up into our budgeted total cost. All right, welcome. So notice that within the Primavera P6 model, there are three major, resource categories. So we have what we refer to as labor resource. So when we talk about labor resource, basically labor resource refers to personnel, human beings. That's what labor resource refers to. Then we also have the non-labor resource. So in non-labor resource, you're talking about maybe something like, for example, a vehicle, or machines that you use in the course of your project. All of these are part of what we refer to as non-labor resource. So they include things like your project equipment and other relevant infrastructure that you use. Then we have the material resource. So the material resource here now talks about consumables or things that are used up in the course of the project. Those are the things that we refer to as the material resources. For example, your raw materials, and then also some other items that is used in the course of the project implementation. All of that is exactly what the material resource refers to. So in order for us to go ahead with the regards to resources, it's quite necessary that you understand that Primavera uses the amount payable, or the amount that we have assigned to a particular resource, to be able to determine the cost of a particular activity. This is exactly where we left it the last time when we were talking about the manufacturing facility expansion project. So right now we're going to have to assign resources to our manufacturing facility expansion. So one of the very first things you need to do when you want to create or assign resources is to first of all create the roles. So when we talk about roles, there's a difference between resources and roles. So before we talk about resources, first of all, let's talk about roles. So let's understand that there's a difference between the resource as well as the roles. So when we talk about resource, remember, like we explained earlier on, resource come in three major categories, which are the labor resource. We also have the non-labor resource, and then we have the material resource. So those are the three resource categories for our resources. However, if we talk about roles, roles now talk about the position, or another term we can use in place of role could also be the office that the individual occupies. So for example, project manager, this is a role. And then also, let's say developer, this is also a role, as it were. And then also you can also talk about other roles. For example, an architect. Architect is also a role. Or let's say, for example, engineer. This is also another example of what we refer to as roles. So remember, we said that roles simply refer to the position or the office that is occupied, while the resource here, we now talk about three resource categories, which includes the labor, the non-labor, as well as your material resource. So for your labor resource, which of course refers to your human resources, you need to sometimes assign roles to some of those your labor resources, and that's part of the reason why it is quite necessary that we create, or rather that we come up with the roles before we begin to talk about the resources. So to create the roles, part of the things you need to first of all do is you go to the enterprise menu. So when you click on enterprise, you're going to see a roles header there. So you just simply click on rows. So when you click on rows, you notice that the rows window appears. And in order to add row, all you simply need to do is you click on the add button by the right hand side. So when you click on add, it will bring up an information that says the filter wants to display all the rows. Just simply click on OK. Alright, so the moment you do that, you're going to see the rows for the rows that are already existing within your Primavera P6 conspicuously displayed. And then also you're going to see the new row that you've just added. Of course, in my own case, I usually like taking it to the top so I can distinguish it from the other rows that come by default. So to do that, simply click on this up arrow and then make sure you've outdented it to the left. And then you can now take it to the up part. So part of the roles we're going to be creating would be the role of the project manager. So under the role ID, I type in PM. And then under the role name, I type in MFE Project Manager. So I've created a role now. Now let's also say I'm going to also create another role. So all I need to do is I click on the add button and then I can create a second role. Let's say contract manager, for example. So under the role ID I put CM and then under the role name I simply type in contract manager. So our contract manager is going to be the one responsible for procurement within the project. Of course, don't forget that I can also use this to create like an organogram. So let's say, for example, the contract manager, works directly under the project manager. All I simply need to do is I move it left one step, and then you notice that it's now directly under the project manager. And also, let's say, for example, I also have another role, which is the role of an architect. So I click on the add button. So if you notice what has happened here, when I clicked on the add button, it took it to the top right above the MFE project manager. So don't worry if that happens in your own case. We need to see how we can arrange it and put it in the proper location much more later. So remember, we have the architect. So under the role ID, I simply type in a short abbreviation for that. And then I type in architect under the role name. Okay. And let's see if we can create one more role before we wrap this up. So let's say I also have another role, which is engineer. So I put in NGR and then under the role name, I type in engineer. Okay, good. So I've created that. Now, don't forget that these roles that we have created are still under the, project manager that we created earlier on. So it's now time for us to arrange them in the proper order. So you can see the MFE project manager that I created and is down here. So I want to, be able to arrange it in the proper order. So I simply select the MFE project manager. And then I click on the up button. So I make sure I take it to the very top, which is what I've done. So you can see the architect. You can also see the engineer, which I've created. So remember, this architect is under the MFE project manager. So I move it right one step. So you can see the architect comes directly above the, the contract manager. I can also move it down if I choose to. And then the engineer too will do the same thing. I move it right one more step. Okay, good. So you can see what I've created. So you can see the project manager for the MFE project. And then directly under it, I have the contract manager. I have the architect. And then I also have the engineer. So those are the roles that I have created. So once you've been able to create these roles, then you can simply click on the close button. So remember how we created the roles. We simply went to Enterprise, then we clicked on Roles, and then we clicked on the Add button, and then essentially we added the various roles in our project. So once you've added the roles in your project, which is what we have just done, it is now time for us to create our resources. So to create our resources, first of all, we navigate to the resources page. And then there are various ways you can do that. You can simply click on Enterprise. And then from the enterprise menu, you're going to see that we have resources there. Another way you can do that is simply to click on the resources, icon on the directory bar, which is the bar by your left. You're going to see an icon that looks like a human being, the very first one. So simply click on it. So once you click on it, it takes you directly to your resource page, or what we refer to as our resource dictionary, which is exactly where we are at the moment. So some cases, after you've clicked on this, you may notice that your resource page is totally blank. If that's the case, there's absolutely no need for you to be worried about that, because much more later we're going to see how we'll be able to display all our resources. So once you've been able to load or open your resource page, the next thing you need to do is to add resource. So in order for you to add resource, simply right click on the resource page, anywhere on the resource page, and then click on the add button. So when you click on the add button, you may get a notification that says that Primavera wants to open all the resources in your project. Simply click on OK once you get that notification. So once you do that, once you click on OK, it will open up all the resources that you already have in Primavera, and you probably have a view like this, which is currently what I have. So wherever you're seeing the resource, I want you to click on it and then go to the command bar, which is by your right, and click on move left. So make sure you indent it until you can move it left no more, and then move it up. So you click on the move up button. So keep clicking on move up until it is the very first resource at the very top of your resource table. So this is exactly what we have done. So we're going to be creating 3 labor resources. Then we're also going to be creating 3 non-labor resources, as well as a couple of other material resources. So let's first of all begin with the labor resource. So under the resource ID, let's simply type in JD, and then under the resource name, we simply type in John Doe. Okay, good. So we have created a resource. It's as easy as that. If you look at the next column, you're going to see resource type. And then in this case, you notice that the resource type by default is showing labor resource. But we need to do some tweaking here, because since John Doe is the project manager, then we need to assign John Doe as the project manager. So for us to be able to do that, you come down to the detail view. So you look at general. Under the general, you can see the resource ID, which is the JD, and then you can see the resource name, which is John Doe. And then, of course, aside from that, you notice that you also have your employee ID. So just in case this resource person works in the organization and has an employee ID, you can simply enter it here, and then also enter the person's job title, as it were. Then there's also another option for you to enter the resource person's email as well as phone number. So the general part is basically for you to capture major details or some information about the resource that you've just created. Okay, so another place we're going to be taking a look at is the detail part. So the detail part is where we have the liberty to classify this as labor, non-labor, or material resource. If you were paying attention when we started this particular session, remember I told you that there are 3 resource categories, and that those 3 resource categories are labor, non-labor, and material resource, which is exactly what you're seeing here at the moment. Okay, all right. So once we've been able to classify that as labor resource, so you just leave it as labor resource, and then you would also notice that it will show your currency, as it were. So you can leave it at the currency, or you click on the browse button here and select the relevant currency that you want. Okay, good. So let's work with the US dollars, as it were. Now, another aspect where you might also need to take a look at would now be your calendar portion. So notice that here, you will notice that by default, Primavera assigns calendar to whatever resource that you've created. It assigns a default calendar to the resource. You are at liberty to use this calendar, or you click on the browse button and select any calendar that you have from your calendar, page, as it were. Aside from that, you can also create a new calendar straight up from this particular window, and that's also one key thing that we can do from the details view. And then you also determine the default units per time. So in essence, we're going to be talking about how many units of these resources that we use per period of time. And that's exactly what this default units per time here clearly illustrates. Okay, good. So another part we're going to be looking at is now our units as well as prices. So under the units and prices, here, this is where we determine exactly how much this resource person earns. We're going to be determining exactly how much this resource person earns per hour, or how much this resource person earns per day. And that's exactly what happens under units and prices. So let's go back to the detail view. And since we're going to be having one project manager, so I simply use 1 per day under the default unit and time. Okay, so I go back to my units and prices. So it asks for maximum unit per time. At every point in time, we're not going to have more than 1 project manager. So I still leave it at 1, per day with regards to maximum unit per time. And then under the standard rate, this is now where I enter how much the project manager earns per day. So I simply type in 1000/D. Okay, so what I've just typed in is that the project manager earns 1,000 naira per day, and that's exactly what we have just created. All right, so once you've been able to do that, then the next thing is for you to create the roles, or rather to assign the roles. So again, you simply click on the roles tab, and then below on the left hand side, you're going to see an assign button. Don't forget, if the assign button is not showing, you can drag up your detail view, and then you're going to see the assign button. So simply click on the assign button. It will take you to the assign resource roles, and then select the role of the project manager, and then click on assign. So you notice that it has assigned the role of project manager to John Doe, and then also we have been able to determine that John Doe earns 1,000 per day, and then of course we need 1 per day, and then also we captured other details that we need for John Doe. So once you've been able to do that, you simply close the assign roles window, and then you would have been able to create your resource. Okay, good. So let's also create another resource person. In this case, we're going to be creating this resource using another method. So from the command bar, which is on the right hand side of your screen, simply click on the add button. So when you do that, it brings up the resource wizard for you. So the essence of the wizard is that the wizard actually can help you and navigate through all of these processes that we have talked about. And then of course it will also enable you to create your resources using these processes at a time. So this time around, we're going to be entering a new resource person. So let's enter JS as the resource ID, and then under the resource name, enter Jenny Smith. And then you click on next. So when you click on next, ensure that label is selected because this is a label resource. Then you click on next. Then to ask you how much does this resource person earn per day. So let's say this resource person earns 500 per day. So I simply type in 500 per day. How many units of this resource do we need per day? So let's say we need 1 unit per day. And at every point in time, we are never going to exceed 1 unit per day. And then you click on next. So you can enter the phone number and the email address of the resource here. Then click on next. It will ask you to assign roles. So we click on the assign role. So let's say Jenny Smith is the contract manager. So we select the contract manager, and then we assign the contract manager. And then we can close this window and we click on next. So it will ask us for the resource calendar. So we're not going to be creating a new calendar. So we are going to be selecting an existing calendar. So click on next and leave it at the standard, work week calendar. And then click on next. Also leave it to auto compute actuals next, and then you get a congratulatory message, and then you click on finish. So notice that we've created another resource, which is Jenny Smith. And Jenny Smith is also a labor resource who is our contract manager, and then default unit per time is 1 per day. If you check on that unit, the units and prices, you will see the 500 that we added as the billable per day, and then also some other information as we captured in the detail view. All of these are part of the things that is clearly illustrated here. So we're going to be creating another resource, which is a third resource. So remember that Jenny Smith, which is a contract manager, works directly under John Doe, who is the project manager. So again, let's create another resource. So you can use any of the types of method that we have used, either using the wizard from the command bar or directly creating the resource simply by right-clicking on the last resource you've created and then click on the add button. So when you do that, it creates a portion for you to add your resource. The next resource I want to create should be on the same level with Jenny Smith. So I simply click on the move left button, and then it moves it left one step. So let's say the next one is the architect, and the architect is EK. So under the resource name, I simply put Emmanuel King. So that's the resource name. And then don't forget that this is a resource. This is a resource resource type. Under the detail view, I now select unit and price, and then I'm going to be needing a maximum of 1 unit per day for this resource. And then under the standard rate, I enter 500 because that's how much this resource should earn. And then I can also enter 500/D, which says that this resource is going to be earning 500 per day. So under the role, I click on the role part, then I click on the assign button, and then I select architect, and then I assign, then I close this. Okay, so I've also been able to create another resource. Then also don't also forget that in the detail view, because we're going to be having just 1 architect, so I change it to 1 architect per day. So that's exactly what we have just created. So the last one is the engineer. So we're going to be creating the engineer. So again, I right click, or better still, let me use the wizard. So I click on the add button in the command, and then I choose the engineer. So let's say, for example, our engineers is going to be provided by an engineering firm. So that's the name of the engineering firm is JK. So I simply type in JK there. Under the resource name, I type in JK Daniels, and that's the name of the engineering firm. And then I click on next. So this is a labor resource, so I click on next. And then let's say for our engineers, each of our resource persons in the engineering part earns 1,000 per day. And we're going to be needing, let's say, about 2 engineers for the purpose of this project. And we are going to also be having a possibility of this extending upward up to 8 engineers. So under the maximum unit per time, we can leave it at 8, and then we click on next, enter the phone number and the details, and then click on the assign button, and we choose project engineer, and then we assign, then click on next, select an existing calendar. So keep clicking next until you get to the congratulations part. Okay, good. And then don't forget to move it left 1 step. So you notice that we have created 4 resources now, which are the project manager John Doe, Jerry Smith, which is the contract manager, Emmanuel King, the architect, and then JK Daniels, the engineer. Okay, good. So we have created labor resource. So next, let's now create non-labor resource. Notice that you can actually create a header that will help you in your resource classification, so that it makes it a bit more easier for you. So I can simply right click, and then I click on add, and then I move it left, say 2 steps, and then I type in MFEL So under the resource name, I simply type in MFE labor resource. Okay, sorry, I simply type in this is gonna be MFE non-labor resource. Okay, so this is gonna be MFE NLR, yeah, non-labor resource. Okay, so under the resource type, I simply click on the drop down and then I change it to non-labor. So why I'm doing this is so that I can have this as a category where I'm going to be putting all my non-labor resource. And then if you notice, the symbol for non-labor resource looks like, you know, two sets of wheels, as it were. And then notice that the symbol for your labor resource looks like human beings. So I right click and then I click on add. So for my non-labor resource, I'm going to be creating 3 non-labor resource. So let's say for my non-labor resource, I have concrete mixer. So I simply type in CM, and then under the resource name, I type in concrete mixer. And then I click on add again. Okay, so remember this is a non-labor resource, so make sure that this is clearly assigned. So again, I go and edit the details under the maximum unit per day. So let's say we're going to be using 3 concrete mixers per day, and then of course maximum unit per day, I also want to leave it at 3 per day, and we're going to be paying, let's say, 100 per concrete mixer. And of course every other information with regards to the concrete mixer will be entered in the general tab. Alright, so once you've done that, you also right click again and then click on add, move it left 1 step. And this time around, we're going to also be creating, let's say, HV. So we have it as hand vibrator. Again, this is a non-labor resource. And for that, we're going to be needing a maximum unit of about, let's say, 3. We're paying 50 per hand vibrator, and then under the default unit, so I select 3 per day. Okay, good. So I've created hand vibrator, and then of course let's create another non-labor resource. So again, I right click and then I click on add, and then I move it left 1 step. So this time around, I simply type in ESC and then I type in excavator. Okay, and then again, we're going to be needing 1 unit per day, and then the maximum number of units is 1 per day. And for the excavator, let's say we're paying 1,000 per day. Alright, so if you notice, I did not create rows for these non-labor resources, because typically the non-labor resources should not have rows because they are not humans per se. So once we have been able to create the non-labor resource, then we are going to now create the material resource. So to create the material resource, another thing we now need to worry about is what we now refer to as unit of measure. Don't forget that your material resources usually come in various units. So that's part of the reason why you need to be able to determine, okay, what's the various unit or the unit of measure for my material resource. So for us to be able to determine whether we have the sufficient unit of measure or we need to create more, we simply click on admin and then click on admin categories. So when you click on admin categories, the admin categories window pops up. Then click on unit of measure. So under the unit of measure, you're going to see the various parameters or unit of measure that is there by default. Notice that in case you do not have your own unit of measure clearly stated there, you can simply click on the add button, and then under the unit abbreviation, you type in the unit abbreviation. So let's say, for example, we need to measure in feet or foot as the case may be. So I simply type in FT here, and then under the unit of measure, I type in feet. Okay, so good. So you notice this is exactly how to create an additional unit of measure. So you determine the unit of measure that you're going to be needing, and then based on that, you can now create these units of measure. So once you're done with that, you can click on close to close this window. Okay, so let's now assign, or rather, let's now create material resources. So again, I right click and then I click on add, and then I move it left 2 times. Let me change the header to MR. So this is my material resource category. And then under the resource type, I change it to material resource. Good. So I've been able to change this now to material resource. So under my material resource, I'm going to be creating some material resources. So let's say, for example, I'm going to be creating cement. So I click on add, and then I type in CM. I already have a CM. Okay, let's leave that CM1. Then I type in cement. So let's say cement is now going to be measured in bags. So I can actually choose the unit of measure from the table here, or I can come to the unit detail view and also choose the unit of measure depending on, you know, exactly what I want. So you can see I can choose the unit of measure from the details under the detail view. So I click on the browse button where you have unit of measure, and let's say I measure cement in bags, for example, or I measure cement in tons. Depending on the situation, I can choose whatever unit of measure that I use, and then I click on, you know, assign. So you can see the unit of measure here has changed. Now under the units per price, let's say a bag of cement is about 50. So I type in 50 for a bag of cement. Under the maximum unit per day, I remove whatever is there, because I might not be able to determine how many bags I'm going to be needing per day, for example. And then also I go to default units per day, and I also put 0 there, because I might not be able to determine how many I'm going to be needing per day. So it will depend on the volume of work and the type of, you know, activity that we're carrying out for that day. So, and then I right click on cement again, I click on add, I move it left 1 step. This time around, we're going to be creating granite. So I type in GR here, and then I type in granite. Under the unit of measure, I click on the drop down. Granite is measured in tons. Alright, so I choose how many units per day. I'm going to be leaving it at 0. And under the units and prices, I'm also going to leave it at 0 for maximum unit per time. And then let's say granite costs 500 per ton. And then I'm also going to be creating another material resource. This time around, I'm going to be creating sand. So I simply type in sand here. And then under the unit of measure, which I can do from here, I also choose tons. Sand is measured in tons. And then of course I change this to 0. Then let's say it also is 300 per ton. And then under the details as well, under, you know, default unit per time, I also change it to 0. So I have cement, I have granite, I have sand. So I've been able to create at least 3 material resource. So you can see these are the resources I've created so far for my MFE project. I was able to create 4 labor resources, and then also for my material, for my non-labor resources, I created 3 non-labor resources as well as 3 material resources. Alright, so once you've been able to create these resources just like you've mentioned, all you simply need to do is you navigate back to your activities page. It is now time for us to assign or allocate these resources to each of the activities that you have in Primavera P6. Okay, so this is the end of the part 1 of assigning resources, as well as of creating and assigning roles and resources. So during the part 2 of this lesson, we shall now show you how to assign resources.